Right, I'm with the gentleman here who is...
Peter Maistre, I'm president of the Jersey Farmers Union.
And never sleeps by the scene of it, because everywhere I go he is. He's at the conference, farming conference, now he's at this planning conference. I think it's the third day. I'm beginning punch drunk already. So you're here for how many days will you do here?
I've got one more day this week and then one day the following week on the economy.
Right, and you've got things in the ground which you have to attend to?
We've got cauliflowers which we grow for the local market, and we've got a herd of cows, and we are standing potatoes.
I can't quite make this today. My mind is completely muddled, because you're speaking for the farming, and every day they come to you and say, well, what's that piece of ground like? You say, well, it's not very good, or it's good agricultural land. How do you know whether a piece of land is good? I mean, what basis do you know it's good land?
Right, well, I suppose the obvious answer is experience. We farm as a farm with my brother, and we've got land in every parish but St Helier, and so most of the fields that are being put forward, I know where they are, and I know whether they're good for just cattle grazing or whether they're good for all crops. And if a field is good for all crops, it's very important. Size is very important when it comes to fields because of the size of machinery and the production savings you can make by having a larger field. And the third category of field which we are very strong on supporting is the ones, particularly the ones put forward yesterday, which were the fields at Montelabe, which form part of not only a dairy unit but an organic dairy unit.
Well, that was particularly one because you were strong on that, but the rest of the films you don't say a great deal, and this is what's puzzling me. Why don't you say, no, we can't afford to lose that, that's agricultural land?
Well, I think you have to remember two things. Firstly, we made a written submission, and the inspectors have made it very clear they don't want me to repeat every time how good a field is when we put it in the written submission. But a lot of the fields are very similar, but there are strategically important dairy fields, and there are very good productive land that we don't want to lose.
And virtually every applicant is saying we will build affordable houses through the gateway.
I know if everyone is passed, we're going to have thousands of houses.
I mean, suppose they were passed. I mean, what would that effect be on agriculture? It would be horrendous, wouldn't it?
It would be. I think our comfort is that the Minister was looking for sites, I believe, for about 250 affordable homes in his preferred list. A couple of those dropped off, and so most of the others are just replacement fields, and we're hoping to persuade the inspector by attending these hearings to choose fields that have least value to agriculture.
But even the projected plans for housing isn't going to supply the need, is it? It's not going to solve the problem, which has been there for years. Ever since I've been in Jersey, it's been the same. We haven't got enough houses.
Well, this is not an agricultural answer, because this is just listening, as you have done the last couple of days. It's quite interesting because the shortfall is about 500 homes they've got to build in the next 5 years, and the building capacity is only about 380 or 390.
Right.
So we're going to end up with a shortfall. And when you see that we've got a hospital project on the way which is going to eat up building labour, I can't see...
700 people, they said they wanted to build the hospital, the original scheme. That was where they were coming from, where they were going to be housed. These were questions
exactly.
For another day.
So one hopes that doesn't have a negative impact on the affordable housing.
I mean, I have my own views about this. The projected figures don't include the people without housing quals. This is one of my... I wasn't going to discuss that with you. I mean, it's peripherally touched upon by the people who are in farming industry and some people who are seasonal workers in the old-fashioned sense. But there are probably 12 to 15,000 people who haven't got their quals but live somewhere.
Yeah.
And they... In theory, as things stand, they will build up their quals if they stay the course. Of course, they don't all stay the course. They turn over some code, they go away, say, I'm fed up with this, I'm going to get married somewhere else and go away. But basically, you've always got that figure, 12 to 15,000, and they're not even being discussed here.
No, that's we're just literally concentrating on sites, and
That's right.
it's been today we're being let off early, but yesterday was a very long session.
Yeah, I didn't stay to the bitter end. I gave up after.
It was 5 to 6.
Was it 5 to 6? You see, what puzzles me again about this, these are farmers or land owners. They're not necessarily farmers. I keep saying the owner of the land, not necessarily the farmer. They're prepared to give up their land if they can cash in their chips and say build affordable houses, they go for it. So these are willing sellers, all these people.
Yeah, they are. I think they were all identified as willing sellers, and you're quite right to say. I think the percentage of land owned by actual farmers is down to about 22-23%. The rest is all rented.
The other aspect, of course, which relates to this, is it better to put cannabis on the field than a house? I mean, my view is that it'd be better to build a house rather than grow cannabis, because as far as I'm concerned, that's still a loss to agriculture. I don't see cannabis as agriculture, but you do.
Well, all the cannabis at the moment is being put, or certainly all the ones that I know of, is either being put into agricultural buildings or into agricultural glass houses, and which actually does give, for some of the redundant sites that are not derelict but they're redundant, it does give them a new use.
Because they were talking about glass houses today. Now, I know of very large glass houses which weren't built all that long ago. They're serviceable. Whether they're serviceable for cannabis, I don't know. I suspect cannabis has its own peculiarities in the growing process. I expect it'll need specialist glass houses, won't it?
I think you're right, and from the sites that I know they're using, they do actually do a lot to the glasshouse sites because they have to for security, so they can refurbish.
Well, that's another aspect. I mean, this is the thing that we're told about agriculture is nice green fields, or brown cows in green fields, and all that looks pretty. You start putting big 10-foot high fences around them, they're not so pretty, are they?
No, that'll be a planning decision, not a
But
farming
what do
decision.
farmers think about that? Because this is a very cultural thing. I mean, I'm not a farmer's boy. I know nothing about farming at all. I'm a city boy. And it's all very strange to me to talk about it as a cultural activity. It's not just a business. And if you think the countryside could, if someone was a fenced off area because they were growing cannabis, that would be dreadful, wouldn't it?
It would be, and as I say, I think all the cannabis production is going to be indoors. Hemp is slightly different because it does have other uses, and the Jersey Hemp Farm, for example, will grow about 100 verges of outdoor hemp.
Right,
that's a different product.
You can hardly see that from the road, fortunately. The one.
Yeah.
So it's hidden away. So that's good. Yeah. But presumably the other ones won't be. I mean, how do you view the crops? Tea. Cannabis, those are the ones. But any alternative crop will do. They're desperate to diversify away from spuds. Why?
Why? Because at the moment we literally have got all our things in one basket, and that is potatoes. And the tea industry is actually quite interesting because at least that is an outdoor activity. It's grown outdoors. But the two things that tie tea and cannabis together, they both need a lot of labour, which is something we don't have a lot of.
Well, that's yet another problem.
People don't seem to be talking about that at the moment.
The accommodation, as far as your industry is concerned, it's a huge problem already, importing people from all over the world. But that's not going to get any easier. I don't know what's going to happen. And we're still trying to resolve Brexit. We're still trying to resolve our relationship with the European Union. These things, COVID has knocked everybody for six. These are unresolved problems. We don't know what the problem. All these, we all know what the unresolved problems are. I don't know how you guys are going to plan for the next 20 years. I just don't get it. I don't see it. And if there's so many people prepared to sell their land, well, you can't buy it back again, can you?
No, you can't. But as I say, I think the total area, the actual loss of agricultural land, would be probably around the 100 verge mark. Hopefully a bit less if we can get, as we were trying to this afternoon, persuade them to use at least one of the derelict glasshouse sites.
You came out very strong in defence of dairy.
Yeah.
Now, I don't eat meat. I do drink a bit of milk, but not a lot. I mean, obviously, again, it's the image. It's everywhere you see the image of the Jersey cow. It's a pretty little cow, which is a bit of a contradiction because the poor thing gets butchered. But you're obviously very emotive. It was very emotive to you. You couldn't allow this farm, this particular dairy farm, you couldn't lose that. Why is it so strong for dairy?
Because I think one thing that COVID didn't bring out, not to farmers because they've always understood it,
right,
but to the population at whole, that food security now is actually quite an important issue.
Right.
And I think, as I mentioned, and you very kind enough to attend the farming conference, I have done for many years. But the question of, you can go in your shop or your supermarket 365 days a year, and there are dairy products. There's milk,
right,
there's butter. there's yogurts, there's ice cream, there's everything, and that's one thing we can't afford to lose as
But we don't have to do it in Jersey. I mean, don't mind. You don't have to. You can buy the stuff from anywhere. I mean,
You can.
I never saw yogurt when I was a child. It was never on the shelves. Now there's shelves and shelves and shelves of yogurt.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can get it from anywhere else, but I think the world over people know actually Jersey milk is the best. I think I said at the farming conference, what Jersey is doing in other parts, and particularly in Africa, with sending these cows out to breed with their native cattle, it is literally life-changing.
And of course, the other aspect about farming is the robotic side of it. I mean, that huge machine they had up there up in the farming conference just happened to be parked there or was there. I mean, it was a monster of a machine, but that's not realistic for Jersey. A machine of that proportion is just too damn big, isn't it?
There are about 14 of those being used
Really?
in Jersey now.
Really?
Yeah. And the productivity gains on that are with 6, 7, 8 people, you can dig as much as we used to with a single row harvester with 11 people.
But who benefits?
The farmers having to do it to stay in business.
Because the product in the end in the market, because obviously they're probably not expensive enough anyway. It's a product which the potato, the Jersey product, gains an extra price anyway because it tends to be the early one, so it gets the top of the market. But you can't go much higher because there is absolute competition out there.
Absolutely, and you're right. We only sell on 3 things basically. We do have a brand name, we are early, and also we actually have a very good taste.
Right.
So we're staying in there, but the trouble is, you're right. It's the base price is very low for the cheapest potato, and you can only be so much above that.
And it's the other robotic side of it as well, everything else to be mechanized. This is where community falls apart, because if you don't have a community of people who are working in the industry where they are, I mean, even if they're finance workers, they are a community of some sort. But if you don't have farm workers, if it is all machines, there's no community, is there?
Yeah, that is one of our problems at the moment, not so much in terms of the staff, but in terms of the number of growers. Now you're down to less than 50. There is no real growing community. Well, there is, but it's very small. And what we tend to find is that when I started on the farm, and there were probably, I think, about 60 or 70 of us in the Young Farmers Club, today they'd struggle to put about 10 together. And so when we all accepted the hours we worked as part of farming and growing, but now you'll find that the small number of young people that do work on the farms, because of the small number of farms, are finding that all their contemporaries at 4 o'clock on a Friday are in town, and they've still got the rest of Friday and all day Saturday.
Nobody can afford to buy a farm, or no normal person can afford if you've inherited millions. But nobody can follow on, can they?
That is one of the challenges, how we get people into the industry. I mean, I think certainly if you've got family members, you try to help them into the industry. But one of the challenges is how we get other young people into the industry. I think as technology and robotics continues to grow, and it's growing at a hell of a pace. I think we will entice more people into our industry who are perhaps don't want to pick cauliflowers from.
Well, if they think it might be a job where they sit twiddling the knobs and they got it all on screen, I suppose that will appeal to some.
It will, and one can see. It looks like in the future we'll have a couple of things. We're going to definitely, I think, we're going to have smaller tractors, because the reason tractors have got bigger is because one man needs to plough 4 verges an hour. Whereas if you've got a robot doing it, you can go back to ploughing 1 verge an hour, but you have 4 of them. And if it's just one man driving it, because he's doing it by a joystick, farming has evolved incredibly in the last 10 years, and I think the next 10 are going to be way out there.
But the products haven't evolved in the sense that it's still spuds and milk primarily.
Yes, and that is down to the price of food and how low it is in respect of where it was 30, 40 years ago. And if you take, for example, cauliflowers, which we can grow locally, we can supply locally because they're in no delivery. But as soon as you put it on a boat, there's the freight, and the freight kills the job.
And the other thing, of course, they sell the idea of Jersey farming as the backdrop for tourism. Now, I can't see cannabis being a backdrop for tourism, can you?
No, and I notice on the front of the bridging plan has a picture of cows, doesn't it?
Always is. They always use it. They always
don't.
use it. I mean, because they used to sell them as lawn cows, as
Yeah.
you're obviously aware, and people buy them just to stick them on their lawn because they look decorative.
Yeah.
You're optimistic then. I mean, I'm amazed that you're optimistic. I'm amazed that you are.
I am optimistic because as I said last week at the conference, I genuinely believe that things will have to change. And the point I was trying to make last week at the conference was we may need some help in the short term to get us through this blip, and then I think things will move on.
Okay, nice to speak to you.
Thank you very much.